Now, of course, the simulator has some limitations. You have to keep in mind that running apps in the simulator is not the same thing as running them on a real iPhone or iPad. For one thing, there are different frameworks. The simulator uses Mac OS X versions of the low-level system frameworks instead of the actual frameworks that run on the device. That means that some code may run fine in the simulator, but not on the iPhone or iPod Touch. So while the simulator is useful for testing most of the functionality, there is no substitute for debugging the app on the device itself to know how it will really run. The simulator also uses the Mac hardware and memory. To really determine how your app is going to perform on an honest-to-goodness iPhone or iPad, you have to run it on a real iPhone or iPad. There are other differences. Xcode installs your app in the simulator automatically when you run the app from the Xcode workspace. That's all fine and dandy, but you don't have a way to get Xcode to install other apps from the App Store in the simulator. Well, since apps don't usually communicate with each other, that's okay. But it does mean that the simulator won't run other apps. The only way you can run an app in the simulator is if you have an Xcode project for it. That doesn't mean you don't have some apps that you can interact with. If you click the Home button, you see that you have contacts, in which you can actually enter new contacts and type their names right here. It works just like the Contacts app on the iPhone. Drag, and you'll see that we also have, of course, Safari we showed earlier. We also have a Photos app. Unfortunately, there are no photos in the albums at this time, but you can sync photos and videos into your iPhone using iTunes. You also have the Settings app, which lets you set the general settings, the Safari settings, including the search engine, and the photo settings. When we build our sample app, I'll show you how you can add your app's settings to this Settings app. Now, the simulator can simulate a maximum of 2 fingers touching. If your app's user interface can respond to touch events involving more than 2 fingers, you need to test that on an actual device. The motion of the 2 fingers is limited in the simulator. You can't really do 2-finger swipes or drags. There are, of course, accelerometer differences. You can access your computer's accelerometer, if it has one, through the UIKit framework. Its reading, however, will differ from the accelerometer readings on an iPhone or an iPad. There are also differences in rendering. OpenGL-ES, which is OpenGL for embedded systems, is one of the 3D graphics libraries that works with the iOS SDK. And it uses renderers on devices that are slightly different from those it uses in the iPhone or iPad simulator. As a result, a scene on the simulator and the same scene on a device may not be identical at the pixel level. Finally, there is no GPS. You can't fake the simulator into thinking that it's lying on the beach at Waikiki. The location reported by the framework in the simulator is fixed at latitude 37.3317 north, longitude 122.0307 west. Let's see where that is by loading a sample app that uses the GPS. First, we will reset the iOS simulator so that it's ready in its factory condition to accept the new app. And we'll quit the iOS simulator because Xcode will run it again when we build and run the other sample app. While I'm at it, I can close the Hello World project for this moment. We will open it later. But you can see that multiple projects can be opened in Xcode. Let's open another sample app called Current Address, and then run the app on the simulator. As you can see, this app uses the non-existent GPS in the simulator, which means it's only going to find one location, and that's at latitude 37.3317 north, longitude 122.0307 west. And where does that happen to be? Let's zoom in and find out. Well, as you guessed, this happens to be One Infinite Loop, Cupertino, California, 95014. And if you get the current address, you can see that. South De Anza Boulevard. Well, you know who lives here. This is Apple's headquarters. You don't have to have the lack of a GPS mess up your ability to debug your app, especially if your app uses more precise locations in the core location framework. Let's open another sample app that does that. First, we'll reset again and close the simulator and close the current address project. We've already opened the Breadcrumb project, the Breadcrumb sample app, which is also in the sample apps from Apple. Click the Run button. Now, this particular sample app actually uses the current location of the computer instead of the GPS or the lack of GPS in the simulator. So if you click OK, it does find exactly where I am at the moment. So you can see it is also possible to troubleshoot an app that uses the core location framework because it can tap into the computer's ability to find its location. But remember, there is no substitute to debugging your app on a real iPhone or iPad. We cover that later when we talk about provisioning.